族もない。学校にも行ってない。友達もいない。ほら、あなたの居場所なんてこの世のどこにもないじゃない。
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Castaway Anime. I'm your host, Neon Manta.
And I'm Crunchy Bagels.
And today, even though it's August, we're coming in like a lion with March comes in like a lion. Nailed it, by the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely nailed
Seamless.
the delivery there.
So if you want to support us, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, head on down in the comments, let us know what you think about the podcast, what should we cover next, and what you think about March Comes Like a Lion, made by Shaft in 2016, directed by motherfucking Akiyuki Shinbo, original manga by Chica Umino, creator of Honey and Clover, and special note for this podcast, it is a pseudo two-parter to the big sharing favorites little special that we're doing between my love of the Owl House and your love of March Comes Like a Lion, as a way to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of Castaway Anime. So, with March Comes Like a Lion, it was a big show. Well, it's a bigger show now than I feel like it was when it came out in 2016. It was definitely one of the dark horses of that season, from what I remember. It was funnily enough, it was around this time. It was the year 2016 where I started getting into watching seasonal anime, and this was the one that passed me by. Granted, I didn't watch much in fall. I think what I watched was Izetta the Last Witch, and that's it. and that and Keijo, because I was cultured.
By the time I got into anime, Sangatsu no Lion had already had its second season. I think either already out or it was like coming out as, I forget which year the second season came out. Oh wait, hold on, no, I think that was 2017, wasn't it? 2017 for the second season? March Comes In Like a Lion season 2 release date, because I keep on, yeah, right now. Okay, it was 2017, so it predated me getting into anime by a year and a half or something like that. So by the time I really started getting into the community, it had already sort of popped off as like this absolute gem, like must-watch anime, and I was like, okay, and sort of had it in the back of my mind for a long time. What finally ended up getting me to watch it was, I think Digibro, now known as B, did like a 7-minute video on Sangatsu no Lion, just sort of like it seemed like a low effort sort of script to me, but it was convincing enough that I was like, okay, this seems kind of interesting. And, you know, people on the servers I was in at the time were like, yo, this is like an absolute classic. You know, I was like, okay, I'll finally succumb to your demands. I'll finally end up watching it. And the rest is history.
Yeah, as for me, I heard good things about it at the time, even with at the tertiary distance that I put myself between like the actual people watching seasonal anime as it was going on in fall 2016. They were hyping up, being like, "Bro, this is that good shit." Like, but I was not really in the mood at the time to watch something so. I could tell back then it was gonna be very, not just laid back, but also kind of sad, kind of slow. Just wasn't in the mood for that type of show. And as the years went by, I'd only heard better and better things about it. And it was getting to the point where I was like, okay, I feel like March Comes Like a Lion is going to be one of those shows where I know it's good, and I know that if I watch it, I'll probably love it. But it's gotta be the right time. I gotta be in the right mind, in the right headspace to watch that show, because it's always like, it's like a restaurant that you see in your neighborhood or in like your town that you've always passed by, and you've always like see it almost maybe on like a weekly basis. You see it at least on the road once a week, and you're like, one day I'm gonna go eat there because I've heard all the things about it. It's the talk of the town, and I'm gonna finally figure out for myself how good it really is. And now this podcast is the excuse I needed to finally dive in to the show. And so I watched it, and I was like, oh yeah, this is here we go. This is gonna be it. I'm gonna love this as much as I thought I did, as I thought I would. And I watched it, and I watched it a little more, and I watched a little more of it, and we watched the 11 episodes. And by the end of the 11th episode, I was like, yeah, I see it. I kind of see it, but like I wasn't as enthused as I thought I'd be.
So Neon, before you continue talking, I just have to let you know that I have hacked all the databases, so I know where you live, and I have hacked a machine gun, and it is pointed directly towards you. So with that in mind, please continue.
All right, well, I guess I gotta pick my next words carefully. March comes in like a lion. Fucking sucks. No, I'm just kidding. No, it is not a bad show. It is just not as good as I thought it'd be, and also as I'd hoped it'd be. Cause it's there are plenty of good things about it, but there's also some things that I thought would just be like things that would drag it down for like, okay, maybe this isn't like a 10 out of 10 masterpiece, maybe it's like a 9, but you know, that's fine. Like one more 9 out of 10 in my life is just a good thing. But then as I would watch more of the episodes, like, I'm kind of struggling to even consider it to be that good. Like, I'm really grasping. Well, maybe that's too harsh of a word. I'm not saying grasping at straws to come up with the reasons why the show is good, because there are obvious and apparent reasons why the show is good, but there are moments that like beat me down to the point where it's like, why are you doing this? Like the masterpiece is here, but I can tell where exactly you're fucking it up, and you're actively holding it back from being the masterpiece that it probably should be.
So that is a lot to take in.
Yeah, because I know you were talking about your pal
Yeah.
Lusky being like you would recreate the Family Guy Godfather moment, and in group chats, and I was thinking to myself like, oh man, like what if I ended up actually fucking hating this show? What if I introduce you to the Owl House? It becomes one of your new all-time favorites, and you introduce me to one of your all-time favorites. I'm like, oh, actually, your taste is shit, and mine is superior.
So if I had to play devil's advocate, sort of, as to like the biggest reason why this show rubs people the wrong way, actually 2 reasons, right? One,
I am actually curious as to why you think what you think the reasons are that I the elements of the show specifically that I dislike.
well, this is just generally what I like, the criticisms I've heard of Sangatsu no Lion, and what tends to make people dislike it. One, it is a show that insists you sit in it, which is that scenes will go on.
It insists upon itself, you could say.
It insists that you stay in scenes for long periods of time, just watching characters, sort of like chill out and relax. And, it makes you stay with these people for a long time. Sometimes, like one of his Sangatsu no Lion's favorite things to do is to just have a scene go on with like very little dialogue for a while. Like the first, pretty much the first third of the entire first episode of Sangatsu no Lion has like no dialogue. It's just like Rei getting ready in the morning, then the insert song comes on, then he starts playing shogi and his dad says like a few things to him, but Rei Kiriyama is like LARPing as a deaf person and doesn't even respond to him.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I hated the first 5 minutes of the first episode.
Why? Okay, we'll get to that later, because I need to get to the second reason. We will massively disagree there. But the second thing is that it is very repetitious. It likes to go over the same point many times, And it is for the sake of giving you a deeper look into it. Like it always, I think at least, always adds something new whenever it goes over the same point again. But if you like shows, having a more breezy pace and going over things on a more surface level, not reiterating the same point, then it's gonna start to bore you a little bit. So those are the two things that most people dislike about the show, if they do. How do you feel about that?
I think I disagree with both of those aspects. More so definitely the first one than the second one. When you said that it insists that you sit with it, I don't have a problem with that, because usually most shows tend to, unless they're like comedies, I guess the more accurate thing to say is that fast-paced shows, well, every show demands that you pay attention to it, but a show like this is more slower paced. It's a slower boil. You gotta soak in more detail. Well, you soak in less details for the same amount of time, whereas like in a fast-paced comedy, they'd like throw a lot of information at you, and you don't have as much time to like soak and absorb. You just have to consume and like be attentive to the next thing. But I don't think there's nothing inherently wrong with a show that is just a slower pace and has you just be with these characters and like in the same location for a long amount of time. In fact, one show that I like that does this and you hate that does this is Yuru Camp. I would argue that it does this sitting, obviously not to the same emotional degree, but to the same sense of the slow boil, the slow pace. I'd say both of these shows are slow paced and ask that you stay with these characters in these situations, in these scenes for longer periods of time than most other shows. But the difference being, with Eurocamp, you're staying with these girls on their camping exploits to simulate the camping experience in like a show form, whereas this show is more of a drama and has a narrative behind it with stakes and character investment on a level that is just not required of Eurocamp.
I definitely don't mind the sitting with it either, since I am, after all, a slice of life fan.
And then your second point was that, hang on, can you give me like the quick cliff notes of what your second point was?
It's sort of repetitious and goes over the same point many times over, which I don't have an issue with because I think it does it well.
I also kind of disagree on like I agree like somewhat. The repetition, it does go over the same general concept, but like the way you were describing it made it sound like they only talked about the same specific facet of a character over and over and over again. Whereas when it comes to our main boy Rei, he's a sad boy. He's all up in his own head a bunch. He's as one thing that always stuck with me from when I first heard about the show was through a Giguk video, and he's just like it's the tragic story about a character who was born with the face of the sad emoji, and it's like, yeah, he is that, and he's always a sad boy. And it does go over his sadness a bunch, but they never tackle it in exactly the same way twice. It's like the general concept that they deal with over and over and over again is his self-doubt and his depression, but they never they never tackle it from the same direction, from the same facet. They'll always explore a different facet, and they'll even tie it in with other people's feelings and how his relationships with these people are affected by it, and how they can reach out to him and he feels a certain way about it. Obviously, this is all very vague because we're not getting into specifics just yet, because that would derail this conversation. But I would definitely not accuse the show of being repetitious. What I would accuse the show of being is, at times, pretentious. There's there's two types of shows that I would call pretentious, that would fit into like this type of pretentiousness that I would describe when talking about a show of this ilk. There's fake deep and there's hashtag deep. And it's important that I differentiate the difference between these two categories. Fake deep is something that does not try at all, but thinks that it's deeper than it actually is. Primary example would be Bunny Girl Senpai. Oh, wow, good job, author. This little girl who developed cuts on her body due to an outside force because she's getting bullied at school. What a genius stand-in metaphor for self-harm. Except you've taken all of the pressure off of the girl for not doing the self-harm to herself. It was done by an outside force, completely out of her control. Whew, almost had a moment of, like, character introspection to be like, oh wow, imagine this individual is so fucked up that they have to resort to harming themselves in order to, like, express their sadness or just feel something. But no, if it's a magic force doing it, we can throw out all the guilt altogether. Whew. What a genius concept. What a healthy concept for your terrible show and story, whatever. Bunny Girl Senpai fucking sucks. If you like it, you're stupid.
Oh, wow.
I cannot stand that show. Whereas hashtag deep is while the show has something, it has something interesting to say, and it can be thoughtful at times, is oftentimes so far up its own ass that you can tell they're trying, but they also end up feeling like deeper. They think they're deeper than they actually are. Like, a good example is that first 5 minutes of episode 1, where there's barely any dialogue, Rei doesn't say anything, and it's just him being depressed, doing his shogi thing as the sad song's playing over the trip to the shogi hall, but there's not really any clever direction or, like, feeling that you get aside from being beat over the head with, like, do you get it? This man is depressed. Have we made that clear yet? How much longer should this scene go on for before this is made clear to you, viewer?
I disagree with that very heavily. What I would consider beating you over the head with how depressed he is if he had a monologue. Like, every day I'm so sad.
He does! That's the problem!
He says it in, like, one sentence.
For a guy, no. You're actually lying. You're actually lying to me right now.
Okay.
For a guy
which scene
who
are you
speaks
talking about?
Mostly in inner monologues, he cannot shut the fuck up.
Okay, well, that is true. He can't shut the fuck up. I will give you that.
Only in his mind. That is my biggest problem with this show. Rei, I want to like him. I want to connect and feel with the guy. But 75% of the time he goes into an inner monologue, I want to shove a brick into his mouth, and then, like, punch his jaw so his teeth, like, shatter. Just so he can, incapable of speaking. Because it's, like, oftentimes it's just, like, annoying. Other times, he is literally repeating information that we have gotten already from the scene. Like, there's this, let me find it. Let me find it in my notes. There's this scene where, so it seems Hina wants to give this boy named Takahashi, who she's concerned about, a homemade lunch. And literally, Akari established that in the literal previous line. No, you did not need to say that in your head. I, as the audience member, got that from this other character saying that. You did not need, that was a pointless addition, you wasted my time.
I don't remember it coming right after that line.
It
but,
did.
like,
It did.
Okay, if it did,
I would not be
then
this upset about it if I didn't, like, do that.
Like, I can definitely see in that case, like, that being a little annoying. The one I thought you were going to point out is when he points out the metaphor of the cuckoo.
I did take note of that, and I did make fun of it. Let me find that in my notes. I should have numbered these episode notes. How What wasn't it just incredibly convenient that the TV in his kitchen was playing an Animal Planet episode on the cuckoos that push eggs out of nests to get all the attention from their adoptive parents, while Rei just so happened to be doing the dishes? Isn't that just convenient? And then he looks, he watches like, oh, he just like me for real. He sees the bird, it's like, oh, that bird, he just like me. That's what I did to this family. Have we made this point clear yet, viewer?
I mean, I don't think it's convenient because it's like, no, it's just some rant. Like, it's been a long time since this all happened. You know, a lot of days have passed, a lot of chances for the TV to flash some stuff about cuckoos. It seems like, this was just any old day. It's certainly a coincidence, but it doesn't strain the suspension.
The way you're describing it, it's like, well, I'm not saying this is completely out of the realm of plausibility. I'm just saying, like, how lazy do you have to be for this to, like, be the moment where he's like, oh, I get it now. When he was a kid, like, he didn't put it together until the Animal Planet came on the TV, and then put it all made sense. He put the pieces together, and this was like, oh, I get it. That's what I'm doing to this family, and it's like.
It's not him much as not realizing beforehand that that's what he did to the family. Like, that's the entire reason.
He kind of knew, but, like, he now had an avenue to understand it with, and it's just like...
The way I read that scene is that he looks at the TV, and he's, like, feeling upset hearing this thing about the cuckoo, and then he puts it together, like, oh, that's why I feel upset. Listening to this.
It's just that he doesn't even learn it in, like, a school setting. He's just like, where it's like, it would be plausible where, like, they could teach that in, like, a nature class or a science class. The TV just happened to be playing this one documentary about cuckoos while he's doing the dishes at the time that it was airing, and then he, like, turns around and is like, oh, that bird just like me for real. And my literal next note, like, in my notes that I took of these 11 episodes was, you know what? I'm gonna say it. This show can be a little pretentious and a little up its own ass at times, like this episode.
To be fair, the dialogue would be better if it was literally just lowercase Comic Sans he's just like me for real in the subtitles. That would be an improvement, I will give you that much. But dude, I want to go back to...
Hang on. What? Before we go back, there's one more moment that made me want to choke whoever wrote, like, who adapted the screenplay. I don't know if this is, like, a problem. No, this is a problem exclusive to the show, because you can't hear in the manga. You can only make sounds in your head. And when you are watching a TV show, you have the power of audio to help with this kind of stuff. So that's where the key word is adaptation comes into play. So, if something works in the source material but doesn't work in the medium you're adapting it in, you have to change it in order to make it a good adaptation. Key point is the flashback where Rei is playing shogi at the hot-ass amusement park with Nikaido. And let me read the note that I have. This is the line that he says in his head. Amid the crying of the cicadas and the department store's background music, I silently gazed at him. He narrated, amid the crying of the cicadas and department store's background music, silently gazing at him. I heard the cicadas. I heard the department store background music. I am looking at him, silently gazing at him. You did not need to say that. I felt like I was being treated like an idiot. Like, and the triangle is the shape with 3 sides on it. Like, you don't have to tell me. I'm looking at it. I'm hearing it. Stop treating me like a fucking retard.
I can see why you'd be annoyed by that. Personally, it doesn't really bother me all that much. It is an instance of
didn't bother you. It didn't make you feel like an asshole.
Not really. It is an instance of sticking too close to the manga, because that would, look like it would feel better in the manga when you don't already have that information. Where his monologue is the only reason why there are cicadas in the background. but it's also sort of like setting a tone because it does sort of work for
They
Rei's.
don't. He doesn't need the narration for that, though. You want to set the tone? Let the audio that you now have the power to use set the tone for you.
It sets the tone of his narration, though. Like he's sort of telling
But
it
it's
as
unnecessary.
A story. It is unnecessary.
It's
I'll give you
unnecessary.
that.
So cut
It
it
is
out.
unnecessary. It just doesn't bother me. Like that's the main
It
thing. I'm
bothers me
getting here.
immensely.
But I do want to get back to the first 5 minutes of episode 1 because you said you hated it because it felt like it was beating you over the head. I
liked the
opposite.
imagery. I liked the imagery of one of the best looking shots in the whole show thus far is that I think it's pretty much in the the opening few minutes or like the opening minute rather of it's all black and white and like the wind's going crazy standing underneath that bridge. It's all two-tone black and white. The shading is incredible. And it's really beautifully animated, and he's just like staring off into the distance. He might be staring at his adoptive sister Kyoko. I'm not remembering all the details, but like that shot in particular, mwah, beautiful. You've told me everything I need to know about this character at this point in time without any dialogue. Good job. But then they go on with the sad music and his sad boy not talking, playing shogi silently. And it's like, okay, you already did such a good job before. Why are you going on acting like you did not already establish the tone? Why are you like beating the tone into my head now?
I think that the opening is really, really good and an immensely great start to the show. And the reason why I think that is because we spend so long with him, silently going through the day, which, by the way, very well directed. I love how they Shaft renders March City, and just watching him walk through the city is entertaining in its own right, at least in my opinion. But it's like a very my favorite part about it is that, you spend so long with him silent. And, he plays shogi, and we sort of silently set up that he is, playing shogi. I'm not sure. I don't actually remember if they set up that he's his quote-unquote father. I know they get to that later, but I'm not sure if, like, the father says anything, like he calls him son or anything like that. But they set up that he's a shogi player. Then, he goes to the Kawamoto house, and instantly the entire tone of the show changes. It's sort of like it's sort
very strong tonal whiplash.
Yeah, it's an expectation and denial sort of thing that also gets you into the headspace of Rei and how he sees the world, because like it starts off so lonely, but then the second you get to the Kawamoto house, frantic directing, tons of dialogue, constant motion, like bright smiles, orange lighting, compared to like I wouldn't say cold, but it definitely doesn't feel as warm and inviting until you make it to that point. And I think that's the tonal whiplash there, it sort of like jumps you awake. Like, what is this? This isn't the show I thought it would be. And it also shows you how Rei sees it as this sort of warm, cozy place, even if he doesn't want to intrude on them.
I will say that my interest in the show made a severe uptick when Rei visits the Kawamoto household, and I'm instantly endeared to Momo in particular, just bouncing up and down while holding a cat that's like as big as she is.
The Kawamoto family is a joy.
Yeah, I fucking love all of them. Obviously, Momo is not really a character as she is a cute thing. But the real characters are Hina and Akari. But they're all a joy to just watch.
In the early part of the show, they can come off a little tropey, which I don't even think is a bad thing, because I think the show handles it well, and that the sort of slice of life one-off stories always try to either tell you something about the character, cut to a deeper meaning, or just like tickle your heartstrings in a small way. It isn't always going to make you cry or even feel all that sad boy vibes, but it is it's always trying to do something more than just a simple slice of life story. And it's always trying to be as intriguing as possible. And I think that's sort of what Bowie's March Comes in Like a Lion on the on the moment to moment level, which is that it is always trying to cut to deeper meaning.
Before we fully move on from the opening 5 minutes of episode 1, the one thing that I did like about it, aside from the beautiful shot that I mentioned before, was the exposition, how it set up the what is essentially the main conflict of the story, of how Rei is he was adopted because we don't find exactly how later, but they make it clear in episode 1 that something happened to his birth family and he was adopted into another family after an incident, and his adoptive siblings are jealous of his success in shogi. We don't learn all the specifics, but we just learned enough, because this note that I took of exactly this point that I'm making was my interpretation of the flashback in the opening few minutes, and I feel like I got it 100% accurately, even despite the fact that they, specifically withhold bits of information, like how the siblings were also like brought up to be good at shogi, whereas I just thought they were just like jealous of his success and he was just getting attention. But I'm looking with retrospect, I'm glad I was able to piece the puzzles together. And I was like, oh no, I kind of hit the nail on the head. They're jealous of his success in shogi, and Rei feels stuck in this middle ground of like he wants to be successful in shogi, but he also doesn't want to drive this wedge between himself and his adoptive family. But like no matter, he can't do one and he can't do the other without something given on the other side. So he feels stuck in the middle.
Personally, when I was first watching the show, I did not piece it together quite that quickly, but I do remember what you're talking about.
I guess I'm just better at digesting media than you are.
I'm taking a fat L today. But yeah, there are like the brief cuts of like his past interlaced with them playing shogi. It is a very captivating scene.
I love how you can tell that like where the manga influences are. They're like just like the cute things that happen in the manga and the little touches that Shaft and Shinbo add with their own directorial flair. Like the cats talking, that's clearly all from the manga. I'd be willing to bet money that it was like a manga thing, that the cats had dialogue in their heads and you could just hear their thoughts, which it makes them a little cuter.
That's sort of a consistent thing with Shaft, where they tend to have this reverence for the source material that they adapt. It's particularly evident when you watch like Monogatari and there's literal text from the novels like flashing on screen every so often. But I get the same vibe here with Sangatsu no Lion, where like the text from the manga is still there, oftentimes narrated in these like sort of pitched up voices in like this goofy tone. And like the cats talking, like you said, that is definitely from the manga.
And then the touches that Shinbo and Shaft put in are the fucking the neck tilts. They're the trademark Shaft neck tilts, but they always intercut them between scenes, like of a character talking. Like either the character will be in the middle of saying something, and like when they need to shift the tone of what they're saying dramatically, they'll turn their neck. They'll just be like a quick, maybe in like not even a full second, just a half-second shot of their neck turning, and maybe like a close-up of their eyes, or the like we were joking about in the group chat, the constant metaphors to water and them cutting it to the inside of someone's bottled drink.
This definitely isn't one of Shaft's more visually like instantly gripping shows in the sense of like style. I do think it's like probably their best show visually, But in terms of like the wacky, off the rails style, this is definitely one of their more toned down shows. And you can even watch it for the first time and think, man, this is just a normal show. But if you know Shaft and know what they're all about, you can definitely see their influence all over the place. You know, the head tilts, like one of the most common things is for the character to be
expression.
Yeah, but like they're
kind of like a deformed chibi simplified drawing to show their emotion for like a frame, because there's no way the manga author drew all that shit in a book.
And there's also like it's a still of the character's face that will be shaking and also discolored. That's one of the more common things for them to do as well. And like the background will be just a solid color.
But as what you were saying about you would only be able to tell you wouldn't be able to tell this was a normal show. Even if I didn't know anything about Shaft, I would definitely be able to pick up on like the head tilting and the different expressions that they cut in very quickly. I would have definitely picked up that this was a directorial decision and not something that was from the source material.
Well, obviously the head tilts aren't. You can't really do that quite so well in manga. And like the camera is panning all over the place.
Well, I suppose you could have like the shot of them like looking one way and then a panel of them tilting their head another direction, but like you could not do it to the frequency that the show does it and have the author have working wrists by the end of it. Like the bones in the wrist would be sand.
Almost as sand as the bones in the characters' necks.
Well, like the crazy thing is we never see them do like the Madoka head tilt or
the infamous Senjogahara frame.
Yeah, see, we don't see like the end result of their neck tilt. We just see like their head turning, but like we see the cause, but we never see the effect.
You know, I think this might honestly be like Shaft's most frequent head tilt show. Like there's so many of them, whereas normally it's just like a one-off thing in a conversation. Like I mean, I guess Monogatari does have quite a few of them, but like normally Monogatari has one of them but goes all in on just breaking the character's neck in two, whereas this is just like almost constant. Like I have this image in my head of like Hayashida. He like tilts his head one way, then the next frame is him tilting it the exact opposite direction as he's still talking.
I just have a collection of like little images in my mind of all the different ways the characters turn their heads. Like and what I like about it is that they all it tells you a little bit about their personality. Or like it does encapsulate the mood that they're feeling. You get to feel you get a feel for the character's headspace without them needing to explain it.
I mean, that's the great thing about the head tilt.
Yeah, case in point with the best. This might be controversial, but my favorite character and what I think is the best character in the show thus far, Kyoko.
Oh, that is an avant-garde pick.
Well, for some reason they decided to give her the best framing in the show, and I was like, God damn, why is this character who's clearly a bitch like getting all like the best scenes and all the best moments? And like, oh, I get it now. She's like she's the villain that the story deserves, and she's a damn good villain.
It's funny that you say that because there's this. I literally took a screenshot as I was watching of this one scene that Kyoko was in because I thought it was so well framed and so well directed.
I mean, I was even thinking of that shot in particular of her just like, yeah, she will be framed in like the way kind of like she's framed in this shot that you sound like a good guy. Like she's just said something inspirational or like maybe touching to the heart. In the shot that you sent me, she's framed like illuminated with a halo of sunlight, like she is a good person, like she just said something really heartwarming or inspirational to our character. But no, she's a massive bitch. but but she's
basically psychotic.
Well, she's like a sociopath bordering on psychopath. Like what would push her into psychopath territory is if she actually did the shit that she said she would. But what makes her the most interesting character to me is that we get to see her Joker origin story, and it is, while like you hate that she is the way she is, you can't just be like, well, you can't say I don't get it, because the sad thing is, like, you do get it and you wish that she wasn't this way, and she can still help it. She is, let's not mince words, she's kind of a bad person, but...
Yep, she is absolutely a bad person. What really enraptures me about Kyoko is the sort of push and pull between pseudo caring for and also completely trying to fuck over Rei.
Oh no, she's manipulative.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. When she left her watch at his place and was like, hey, why couldn't I just meet you at your place? And it's like, yeah, I'm sure you accidentally left your watch there. And the nice thing is they don't ever dive into like whether you should doubt her believability about this, but you are already so familiarized yourself with the kind of person this character is that you just come to that conclusion on your own, and you can like draw your own conclusions, and that's what a good show should do.
She's just really fascinating to me, and like I just like that she isn't just a bitch, or that even with the tragic backstory, right? Like, she would have been a good character if she was just a bitch, but she wouldn't have been a great character. But what makes her a great character is the subtle ways, like all the subtleties of how she interacts with him, of like the small moments of her like grabbing his face and being like, good, he didn't leave a scar. And like her literally threatening to stab her boyfriend.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that we see the evolution of how much of an abuser she is to Rei. Because when they were kids, she was like straight up hostile. She would actually just strike him, and thankfully the dad wasn't having any of that shit and would punish her by forcing her to like stay outside when it's cold in just like her pajamas for a period of time to be like, all right, have you learned your lesson yet? And what's interesting about it, though, is that you get the sense of slight unease from the punishment, not just because it's like kind of an extreme punishment. It's not just like a go to your room moment. It's like, no, I'm gonna lock you out into the cold for, like, you could say it's extreme, but like you could also kind of justify it was like, okay, like, yeah, a sibling should not ever strike their other siblings, so it's extreme, but you can kind of see this, how this old-fashioned style of parenting would work. It's not just because, like, you know, a sibling shouldn't strike their sibling. The dad did that because she did that over a shogi game, and so like striking your opponent after losing is unforgivable, and like she's got to learn better. It's like, that's the angle that you're approaching this from, not as a parent but as a shogi teacher. That's kind of fucked, isn't it?
That sort of gets us to the entire backstory of like Rei's, like the shogi household he ended up in. So the series of events that leads to it is that his parents die, and he gets taken in by this dude who's really into shogi, because he's like, Rei, do you like shogi? Because they used to play shogi together at his dad's house. And Rei was like, yeah, except he doesn't actually like shogi, but whatever, he goes with it. So he gets taken into
the reason that he is like not as into it as he would like let you on to believe is that it was one of the only ways he could get close to his birth father from before he died, when he had spare time because he was so busy with work and everything. So like, even though Rei was not a shogi fan, it was he knew as a kid it was the only way he'd get to spend some quality time with him, and so he's like, well, you might as well, if this is the only way I can interact with my dad when he's not busy, I guess I might as well get good at it so I can keep him entertained, because if I get good at shogi, our matches will be longer, therefore our time spent together will be longer, and so I win through this. And when he gets to play with his dad's friend rather, that would come over and visit and watch over Rei while his dad was busy with work, he forms this bond within this relationship, and like already starts to see him as like a second dad before his actual dad dies in that accident.
Yeah, so it's sort of a pre-established relationship in that way. And then he gets taken to this shogi house, and everything's just always about shogi because his sort of replacement dad is like obsessed with shogi. He's a professional shogi player. Everything comes down to shogi, and it's sort of like this like extreme meritocracy among the siblings where whoever is the best shogi player gets to be
the favorite.
Yeah, not just the favorite, but the only one who can continue shogi, where Kyoko was literally disallowed from continuing shogi because Rei was better than her.
And that was so fascinating to me, because like on one hand, like it's not just as easy as saying it's a toxic household, because the dad and the mom are kind to their children. Like, yeah, the dad can be very old-fashioned and straight up kind of weird when it comes to shogi, but like he never loves the children less. He just happened to give Rei a little bit more attention because he was the shogi prodigy. But he never like neglected Kyoko or Ayumu. For Christmas, he got them very heartfelt gifts. He got a Kyoko a big ass teddy bear that I would have fucking adored if I were a kid, and he got Ayumu a motherfucking Game Boy, which I also would have adored if I had gotten that as a kid. Albeit probably a Game Boy Advance if being contemporary with when I was a kid. But Ayumu loved video games, so he got him a video game. So, you know, like, that's not something I would say a abusive father would do, or a father that didn't love his kids. And I don't remember him ever striking his kids, unless that happens later. I'm just misremembering something.
No, that didn't happen in the this block of episodes.
I don't care if this is spoiled. Does he ever strike his kids?
No.
Okay, yeah, because he doesn't strike pun. He doesn't strike me as the kind of dad who would do that. But the way that he's obsessing over shogi in the household, even though he probably doesn't realize it, it is tearing whatever possible relationship his siblings could have with each other apart. And granted, part of it wasn't even his fault. Like, that relationship was kind of doomed from the beginning because Kyoko was hostile towards Rei from day one. Because it's classic, I got a new sibling unexpectedly, and now I feel like I'm gonna get, like, I can't possibly receive as much love from daddy as I would beforehand, because there's only so much love to go around, is what they perceive as children. And so Kyoko is downright hostile to Rei, to the point where she is striking him, for beating him at shogi, for watching him, or her rather, being punished outside. She would open his window, come in and like punch him, and I'm sure she got like aptly punished for that.
Yeah,
she got chewed out by her dad for that. But what's fascinating by it is that both much kind of like Rei, both Kyoko and Ayumu are not big into shogi like the dad was. They only do it because that's like just how they were brought up. They didn't come to love the game on their own. They just developed an appreciation, maybe not even appreciation, more of just like a knack for shogi, because they were just, that's how it was in the house. What are you gonna do? The way to this father's heart is one of the best way to his heart is through shogi. So when Rei comes along and upends that to the point where Ayumu feels like, oh, what's the fucking point of trying if I'm just gonna get, I dedicated all this time and effort into this thing that I didn't even really care about, but if I'm just gonna get beaten by Rei, who just came into my life without my consent or preparation, and just is going to be the better shogi player, what's the point of even trying? And so he just kind of retires on his own merit, whereas Kyoko is more dedicated than Ayamu, but still also cannot find it within herself to beat Rei in shogi. So she's trying not because she has to give up of her own accord, but because she is forced to give up by her father, being like, nope, you can't beat Rei, so you might as well not even try. But she's like, well, I already you made me dedicate all this time into this thing that I didn't even really like, and now you're telling me I can't even do it, this thing that I developed a talent for, but because his talent is greater than mine, now I can't do it? What the fuck? And so she takes some of that aggression out on Rei. But even to the point where it's like, she doesn't even view Rei as like, she gets upset with Rei when he starts calling her dad his dad. And even though the dad is like, no, it's okay, I want him to call me dad because I am pretty much his dad, and I would be uncomfortable if he just called me his shogi master, his teacher, when he lives in my house and I raise him as one of my own.
What I love about the backstory is that it's like it makes so much sense why all the characters involved act the way they do and became the way they are, while also just being like a very it's a very realistic scenario. You can picture people acting exactly like this in real life. Like, you can visualize this type of household really existing, and it's not a generic backstory or anything like that. It's a very distinct backstory as well. And it's like, something that captures the attention, makes you wonder about what doesn't get shown, because it is only really shown in these brief bits and pieces. And it's like, well, what happened? Like, what else happened? How was it like what would the slice of life anime in this household look like? It sort of captures the imagination and gets your mind going.
And then it all comes to a head in a couple episodes later, where that trifling thought Kyoko comes to visit Rei and is just waiting outside his apartment. And you think, oh, is she gonna like berate him or abuse him again? No, she has evolved. She stepped up her metagame when it comes to abusing Rei. Because like it's not, what is there to gain of her just, even though she's like 4 years older than him, what is to gain of just like hitting him some? Like, no, that won't cut it anymore. What she has to do now, she has to get in his head and not only just girl boss, but also just guilt trip. Just hard guilt trip by looking into his opponents and their history, and because she was in the shogi community for so long, she has developed a knowledge, and then she would just research his opponents and then use that information against him by being like, hey, your next opponent is this old man who's been in the game for like 40 years, but hasn't been doing really well. And if he loses this next game, he's going to demote. And all of that hard work is kind of going to go up in smoke to the point where he's going to even consider retiring. If you beat your next opponent, you're going to retire him. Man, I would hate to have that kind of pressure on my shoulders, huh? That guy, I hate to be in that situation. I wonder, it almost make you feel like you should maybe, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, throw the match. Maybe lose on purpose. Give him a little hope.
It's like adding a fourth G to it. Gaslight, guilt trip, gatekeep, girl boss. And then one of my favorite moments in this first block of episodes, specifically relating to Kyoko, is, I think it's episode 10, where Kyoko
I think I know the exact line you're gonna say.
Yeah. Like, she's just lambasting him and like, telling him all about how, oh yeah, your opponent's, this drunk, he gambles and all that stuff, and you must feel real bad about that. And Rei's like monologues to himself, I hate that I enjoy hearing this. I hate that I like her insulting me and making me feel bad and basically manipulating me and trying to relational aggression her way into weathering me down.
Yeah, my favorite line in the entire block of episodes thus far is when she sees him before that match with the guy who's gonna get recently divorced and he's gonna spend like one last Christmas with his daughter as like a family before the divorce sets in. And she says to Rei, children have it rough. They can't choose their parents. Oh wait, it was different for you, wasn't it? You chose your parents. You chose somebody else's father. And I'm like, ooh, this bitch evil. And I love her. Because there's just so much to unpack in that line.
She is a very compelling character.
And like, and I know like it's weird for me to say that she is both my favorite and the best character in the show when she is the most antagonistic, the closest thing the show has to a villain. But because she plays the role so well, like she is a well-written villain. Like I said, we see her Joker origin story. We understand why she is the way she is, and we don't like it. And we want her to, like, that's not an excuse for her to be the way that she is, but we see the reason. We see the path that leads down to the hell she is in now. And even to the point where she surrounds herself, like we find out that she, ever since she was forced to quit shogi, she while Ayumu stayed inside and played video games, she went out gallivanting around town. The specific word they use, gallivanting, to like put in the idea of your head, oh, she's probably like getting into some bad behavior, probably hanging out with the wrong crowd. And we do find out she has an abusive boyfriend, maybe not necessarily to her, but definitely a violent one. Even to the point where we see in a flashback, we only get bits and pieces of, that Rei does step up to him at one point, and he fucking kicked his ass. And that's why we get the scene where where she looks at his face and is like, oh, thank goodness it didn't leave a scar. And then we see the bits and pieces of the boyfriend beating his ass. And it's like, Rei does hold affection for Kyoko to an extent. Like, he will stick up for her, and even though he knows that she's trying to get in his head and just be this toxic fucking bitch to her, he can't bring himself to just hate her. Because, like you said, he does derive this weird, hateful enjoyment of hearing all of the reasons, like, all of these people being like, oh yeah, if you beat them, their life is probably you're gonna make these people's lives worse by beating them in shogi. And like, he derives this like, all right. And like, he doesn't like take a sick masochistic enjoyment from it, but it's like, what else can he do? It's like, well, I'm not, that sucks, bro, but I'm not gonna lose. I'm not gonna throw the match because I have to win. Shogi is my life. If I lose at shogi, I don't have anything to show for it.
I definitely think with Kyoko, the reason he enjoys being insulted like that is because it takes away the guilt. Like, hearing him just be dragged through the mud for what he feels he has done wrong to these people, even though it isn't really his fault, it does take away some of the guilt. And as for shogi, this is probably my favorite part of the entire first 11 episodes. So a bit of
where he
bit of
goes
context
sicko mode in the park.
So a bit of context to this. When I was first going through the show, my biggest fear with Sangatsu no Line was that it would end up going nowhere, where it would have the mixing pot, but it would never really take it to the highs that I thought it would go to.
Like they would just stir the pot but never pour the stew.
Yeah, they never go sicko mode. I thought it would just, well, I didn't think it would be this way, but it was my fear that like it would just linger on for too long.
And stagnate.
Yeah, stagnate. But episode 11 was when my fears were shown to not be true at all. Where after he beats this drunk dude, like this alcoholic.
Episode 10, not 11.
Episode 10, yeah. I always mix that up. I always think it's episode 11, but it is in fact episode 10, and it surprises me every time.
Usually we cover shows in like either 6 or 10 episode blocks, but for this one we're doing it in half, so we're doing 11
even before the podcast, I always thought of this scene as happening in episode 11 for some reason. But anyway, he beats this alcoholic, and because of that, he doesn't give, or at least doesn't plan on giving his daughter the present for Christmas because, he's in a bad mood. He's gonna probably drink and gamble the night away. Probably not even gonna show for Christmas, or if he does, he'll be hungover or like in a terrible mood because he lost the match. And he's not in the gift-given charitable mood. And Rei sort of, he thinks like, oh God, like it's my fault. So, he goes, takes his present that he left and tries to give it to him. He runs up to the dude. He's like, yo, you forgot this. And he's like, never seen it. Like, they literally accentuate
It's not
that
my
line.
wallet.
They literally accentuate that line with like this sort of voice filter, the subtle one. And he's like, never seen it, not my present. And Rei's like, no, it is yours. Like, I saw you with it at the station. And he's like,
Are you not
"Sure."
Patrick Starr? I found this ID in your wallet.
So he sort of like grinds his teeth and then very aggressively takes the present, in a fit of rage. He just stomps off, super mad. And Rei's just sort of stands there, not really knowing what to do with himself. And he starts walking home. But the thoughts, they're stirring in his head, and he doesn't know what to do with them. And he ends up eventually breaking into a sprint, running as fast as possible through town. He goes off to this place in the park and just yells out, like, why is everything my fault? Like, it's not my fault. I'm fighting too. Like, it's not just hard for you guys. I'm fighting to survive too. And he makes a decision right then and there. His first really big piece of character development is, I'm not going to feel guilty for beating people in shogi anymore. I'm going to go out there and fight as hard as I can, and it doesn't matter who gets hurt along the way, because at the end of the day, we're all fighting to survive, and I need to survive. I can't stagnate. I can't live without shogi. This is one of the few things I have in life, and I need to get as far as I can, is basically what he decides to do.
It's definitely the best moment of the at least if not the best moment of this block of episodes, the best Rei moment from this block.
Oh, absolutely the best Rei moment. Although trust me, we are getting way more great Rei moments in the future. Like he comes into his own.
Yeah, I love it was such a bittersweet moment too, because like usually when a character is like so frustrated, they're like screaming their heart out, they're like venting out all their frustrations and whatnot. You want to be like, yeah, just let it all out, buddy. Like, you've had it bottled up for so long. You've earned this. But like to hear him be so scarily honest with himself, being like, this is all I have. If I don't have this, I'm nothing. It's like you want him to both develop like other avenues of like meaning in his life, so that way if like, say the entire game of shogi, like, this obviously would never happen in real life, but say Thanos got the Infinity Gauntlet, just like Thanos snapped the concept of shogi. Like, shogi is outlawed, you can't play it anymore. And the whole, like, his whole living, his whole career that he's been able to do, it's gone. And, like, what option does Rei have for living at that point, to him, in his own mind? Obviously, he doesn't understand that he has friends, that he has people who care about him and want to see him do good in life, regardless of whether it has anything to do with shogi or not, like the Kawamoto sisters. But to him, in his own head, it's like, it's either shogi's all I got, man. If I'm not the best at shogi, I can't live. Like, he'd probably straight up fucking neck himself if he couldn't play shogi, if he either was bad at shogi or couldn't win at shogi, or if shogi was just gone. And so it's bittersweet to see him being like, I'm not, like, both being like, I'm not gonna feel guilty. Like, it's not my fault that I have to beat these people in order to win. But it's like, it's also, you want to be like, do you really have to like tie your existence to this one thing? Can you not like find other avenues? Like, you want to see him develop other reasons for living.
No comment, except that it has sort of been his one method of escapism, basically for most of his life at this point. First, after his parents' death, he just like completely dedicated himself to the game, And then later on, where, like he's dealing with all these thoughts and like he's sort of stagnated in shogi. Like he's reached the final, or at least what was at first his final goal, which is to, go professional, make this your living. And he's like, okay, I've reached the island. I've worked as hard as I can, and now I'm here. What do I do now? And in his head, he's like, it doesn't really matter what I do. As long as I don't get demoted, as long as I keep on playing shogi, I can basically live my life, live my days in this place, in this apartment, in this city, just playing shogi in the same sort of tier with the same people over and over again until I die. And he's like, if this is the final destination, then I've made it. But eventually, he's like, no, this is bad. I don't want to stagnate. I want to keep on going. There's nothing to do but to keep on going. If I stagnate, then what is there to do but be sad all day?
Yeah, it's interesting to see him be like, he doesn't want to lose, but he also has no drive to be the best at shogi. He does not have the shonen burning heart, the boiling in his blood to be like, if I'm not, I gotta be the shogi hokage, the shokage, if you will.
What's interesting to me is that, like, I think he has deep down, even from the very beginning, has always had that drive to win and to be the best. But what he tells himself is, well, there's no reason to keep going. And because there logically isn't a reason to keep going, at least in his mind, he's like, okay, well then, I should just stagnate. I shouldn't care. And he tells himself that's what he should feel. But deep down, it's like, no, that's unsatisfying. And he knows it's unsatisfying, but he tells himself, like, no, this is the end goal. This should be satisfying to me. And I think it's a really, it's a really powerful plot point, I think. And one that is, like, almost sort of briefly just thrown in there, but it is a very interesting part of his character.
Yeah, I especially like the way you can compartmentalize Rei is that he thinks he's a bad person and just doesn't realize he's the only one who thinks so.
Except for Kyoko, but I mean...
Well, Kyoko is putting the idea in his head, like more so than anyone, and he's like internalizing it and being like, well, fuck, man, she's probably right. Like, I think even Kyoko only thinks Rei is a bad person because of something outside his control. That's why I love the line where she's like, you chose your parents, you chose somebody else's father. Like, bitch, no he didn't. He didn't choose his birth parents and he didn't choose his adoptive parents. He allowed himself to be adopted by them, but he didn't ask for that situation in the first place. He didn't want for his parents to die. He just had that thrust upon him, and this was like the best course of action. It was either that or a fucking orphanage. There's a line where he's like, when I was a kid, I didn't know what an orphanage was, but it just sounded like a place I didn't want to be in. It just sounded like a not good place.
The exact line, or at least an approximation of the exact line, is like, I was bullied on the playground and didn't really have any friends, but I could always go home and have time to myself. But if I'm in an orphanage, then all 365 days a year, every single second of every single day, I will have no rest, and I can't be there. And that's why it's such a nightmare scenario to him. And that's why he sort of had to be taken in, else he would go insane.
And that's why I love Kyoko's lines so much, because there's just so much to unpack. And like you want to be like, and like, yeah, my initial reaction was to be like, bitch, he did not choose his parents barely any more so than you did. But then you think about the backstory and you think about all the ways that she perceives it to be true in her own head. And it's like you need a therapist to unpack all the baggage that Kyoko has. And it's like, that's
she definitely needs therapy.
Especially when she's like, yeah, Imre's like, what happens if your violent boyfriend ever gets violent with you? And she's like, oh, if he ever got violent with me, I just fucking kill him in his sleep. I would stab him.
Totally sane person here. Too bad she's so pretty. Why does she have to be so crazy when she's so pretty?
Yeah, why is she the hottest character in the show?
I want to shift gears again to talking about Rei, because I know you don't. You're not a big Rei stan just yet, but I was pretty.
I was definitely more invested in him as the show went along. Definitely, very much so by the end of this block than I was the first few episodes. The first few episodes, I could take or leave him.
So I think I'm coming at this with hindsight of where the show does end up going with his character, and I think that hindsight does make his sort of like admittedly pretentious monologues a lot more bearable, because this isn't really a spoiler, but the show is aware to some degree of how pretentious he comes off at times. And the show is also aware of like how much he monologues and how stuck in his own head he is, and how he's constantly just talking to himself and thinking of himself, he's very egocentric in a sense. Like my favorite moment of him sort of being very self-centered, and I don't mean that to say like he loves himself, but I mean self-centered in the sense that he is constantly focused on himself, which is that
He
in
is
episode
more focused on himself rather than others.
Yes. And my favorite moment when it comes to this is in episode 3, the first big emotional come of the series, which is that when Hina is on...
That's a weird way of putting it. It's a big fucking splooge of heart and passion.
There we go. When she's looking out, Hina is looking out at the sea and crying her eyes out because it's Oban and she's remembering her now dead mom and grandma. And Rei is, eventually walks up right next to her and, tries to basically just be there, like stop these other people from comforting her instead of him. But while she's crying, he starts monologuing and he sort of like remembers the pain that he felt or whatever. And like, thinking about himself, his thoughts aren't hyper glued to Hina. They're more so, sort of acknowledging her, but also then bringing it back to himself by the end, which I think is just a very interesting moment and a very nice touch for the character.
I did make a note about that. I said, Rei sees Hina crying and stares deadpan, with parentheses. I get that he's not supposed to be in touch with his emotions, but, like, he doesn't even lift a hand to her, like, at first. Like, he does go over to her only when he sees other people about to attempt to try to, like, be like, hey, what's wrong, little girl? Crying all by yourself on this holiday. And crying out to your mom, who can only assume is probably dead from context clues.
It is sort of a scenario where Rei probably doesn't even know what he's supposed to do because he is so isolated from people for the most part. Where, it's sort of like an emotionally touchy situation. He's like, well, what do I do? I'm just as distraught over my parents as she is, and I never really reconciled to that. How do I comfort her? And it's sort of like...
Yeah, it's interesting that he doesn't understand, like, despite going through the same pain of losing your parents at a young age, or specifically, I think Rei was more in touch with his father, or at least more affected by his father's loss, rather compared to Hina's mother loss. Like, vice versa. They lost their dad, but wait, did they lose? No, their dad got divorced, right?
They never specify what happens to the dad other than that it's implied that he's still alive. Well, no, they do eventually, but like never in this first block.
Yeah, I remember there was a line being like, they always mention their mom and their grandmother, but never their father for some reason. And like we make it a point to be like, okay, Rei's parents and his little sister died in a drunk driving trunk incident. The Kawamoto siblings' mother and grandmother are dead. We don't know how they died. They just are dead. And so they make sure to know which family members are dead. So the father's probably not beloved by the family. So
we will
but it's
eventually
interesting
get
to be.
that.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. But it's interesting to be like, Rei should know what Hina is going through. Because, like, they pretty much went through the same thing, different parental unit. I guess. And, well, like, But he didn't shed a single tear, right?
He
Not at that instance.
Yeah, he does go into monologuing being like, I didn't, cry over my parents. And I think there's a line where he like questions, was that the right thing to do? Like, should that have been my course of action? He's sort of like cut off. He says like he tried not to think about it. He tried to ignore the situation as much as possible, just devote himself to shogi. Literally just like completely ignore it, basically. Don't even allow himself to cry. Like wonders whether that's the right thing to do. And I guess that also helps explain like why he is probably a little confused as to why or like as to what to do. He never
processed his grief.
Yeah, he never processed it. He never he never just went onto a bridge and cried his eyes out. He just always stared deadpan, not knowing what to do with himself, really.
So we see. I suppose we should take this time now we're on the subject to talk about the Kawamoto siblings. Rei comes into contact with them for the first time because they didn't do a great job of explaining it. They definitely had to fill in the details.
They do. The reason why is because there's a specific detail that needs to be revealed later in the story. So they give you the flash notes now. They're going to give you the full version eventually.
Okay, because like the way that they just showed it in that first flashback was let me find those. It's like Rei is drunk, or at the very least, like if not drunk, he is sick. Or like something like he did to his body that made him sick. I presumed it to be drunk, and from what I gathered in my note was that his quote unquote friends or something took him to a bar somehow, even though he was underage, and they got him some alcohol in him, and he passed out outside the bar that Akari was at, and Akari met him and took him to her house to rest. And I need me a girl who will shove her fingers down my throat to make me vomit and call me a good boy, filling out the ideal male fantasy.
All right, actually, real quick pause. I know I literally just said that they fill in the details, but actually I'm thinking back to it, and I don't actually think they do. I'm trying to remember
is this like
that.
the whole thing?
I'm not 100%
Come on, man, this is supposed
sure.
to be your 10 out of 10 masterpiece.
I mean, I don't have a problem.
You should have all the details. You should know all the details about.
To be fair, there are a lot of details over 44 episodes, but no, I don't think they do ever go over that, now that I remember it.
But like,
I was conflating that with a different scene.
Okay, I was gonna be like, Rei doesn't really have friends, though, right? He has his closest thing to a friend is someone he doesn't even consider a friend, like
what
Nikaido.
Probably happened is that he basically just got bullied, because that is a thing that he went through. Like some people,
but like,
were
who took him to a bar and somehow got him, and somehow not only got him into a bar as an underage drinker, but also got him to drink.
The world may never know. Maybe they go over it in the manga or something.
Cause like I like that was like my biggest question with his origin story. Been like, wait, how the fuck did he get into a bar? How does his ass not get thrown out immediately, along with his friends who are probably the same age as him, if I were to assume?
Sangatsu no Line is definitely one of those shows where like it will leave mysteries for a long ass time. Like it is very content to leave question marks, and then eventually, like 20 billion episodes later, get back to it and be like, hey, remember that? Yeah, here's this now. We're just gonna explain that in full detail now.
And I love the relationship that I love all the relationships that Rei has with the Kawamoto sisters, but I love the one that he has with Akari the most, as they are the closest in age and therefore like also the closest in like
they are not actually the
in
closest
life.
in age. Hina and Rei are actually closer in age than him and
really?
Yeah. Akari, I think
Isn't-
if I'm getting this
I'd
correct,
imagine Akari. Akari is older than he is, but I just assume I see. She's obviously not in high school. Did she graduate high school? Did she drop out to be to care for the sisters?
I think she graduated, but if I recall correctly, she's 23 at the beginning of the show, and then Hina is 13, and Rei is 17.
Okay. Well, I guess what my brain did was be like, all right, well, Hina and Momo are clearly children, so there's no possible chance for a romantic relationship here. Here's someone mature and at least looks like his age. So if there is not them saying that the show needs it, but if there were to be a romantic relationship blossoming between the two, it would be with these characters.
No comment.
I'm gonna take that as they probably don't fuck.
No comment.
But so yeah, Akari has this habit of taking in sickly animals, but mainly dogs and cats, more so cats. But she takes in Rei because he's so sickly looking. He's not taking good care of himself, and after this incident, she's like, all right, listen, buddy, bucko, buddy old pal, clearly you're not taking good enough care of yourself, so I want you to come by and just hang out with us because you don't seem like a bad person, and just come hang out, come eat dinner with us. We will provide for you, and all we ask in return, in fact, they don't even ask anything in return at first, but then he becomes so integrated to the point where even Momo is Momo doesn't find out until a few episodes later that he's actually not their brother, and who just doesn't live with them.
Which, by the way, is a hilarious scene and had me laughing my ass off for minutes on end the first time I saw it. I remember
they treat it like a Santa Claus situation where it's all the adults are oh shit, we let the secret slip, and Momo's just she's not sad about it. She's like, wait, you're not who are your parents then? You're not my brother?
I remember posting the screen cap of Momo being Momo asking, wait, you're not my big brother? To a few different Discord servers as soon as I saw it. It's such a funny scene.
And so yeah, all Akari asks in return is that and not even directly. She just silently wishes, and Rei kind of silently understands and does it not because he feels like he's indebted to the family, but because just this natural relationship is blooming between all of them. He is becoming a member of their family, that especially definitely Hina looks up to the most, whereas Momo kind of just, because Momo's not really much of a character, she's just a little girl and just oh boy, a big bro, whereas Hina's just turns to him for advice. And while she also does the same thing for Akari, she comes to Rei with things that she feels like she can't come to Akari to because she wouldn't have the answers that she's looking for.
Something I really love about Hina and Akari, I was sort of touching on this earlier. If you're a fucking idiot, you can instantly write them off as energetic girl, motherly girl. Oh wow, they're just tropes. Oh, bad character. But what I think Sangatsu no Lion does a really good job of is fleshing out their personalities to where they're believable and very interesting. And like I was saying earlier, the primary way it does that is through these sort of emotionally driven one-off stories, where you get to see them display an array of emotions and get to know what they typically display and how they typically act in pretty much every scenario. It keeps on just throwing new things in the mix, and you get to see more and more sides of these characters. And this is just the slightest taste of their characters is what we're getting right now, because at this point in the show it is a very Rei focused narrative. But just for context, come the end of season 2, Hinata was my favorite character, not Rei. So that's something to look forward to.
That does sound interesting. It sounds like kind of like an Owl House situation where Amity goes from being like a side character to being one of the main characters, and she ends up becoming my favorite character, my favorite and the best character in the show.
Uh, Here's something interesting about Sangatsu no Line, which is that this is admittedly a little bit of speculation on my end, but I get the feeling that Chica Umino was supposed to have ended the story like years ago, and that the show is basically just has perpetually gone on because she got really attached to the characters in the world. Because at the beginning,
Hasn't the manga been going on since like 2007 or some
yes,
shit?
2007. It's got like 18 volumes. It is crazy long.
Yeah, it's still going too.
Yeah,
right?
it's still ongoing. Because like Akari and Hinata and Momo, you know, they're all side characters at the beginning, and I get the feeling they were supposed to be more characters as a unit rather than as individuals, where this is the Kawamoto family, and their purpose in the narrative is to be the fluffy home that Rei can come to for emotional support and, you know, help him along on his arc. But as the show goes on, like, they take on a life of their own.
Yeah, I'm definitely more excited to see more of Akari and Hina. The whole Hina crying thing with during Oban definitely opened me up and made me feel for her more than just being like, oh, she's like the energetic middle child, the middle school girl. I will say, if we could take this opportunity to shift back to talking about, at least for me, the negatives of the show, I feel like the show can get a little, this definitely became more of a problem in the earlier parts of the show rather than the later parts. They did a good job of doing away with this as it went on, but it was definitely kind of melodramatic. There was this one moment in, let's see, episode 2, I believe. No, episode 1. Where we see Rei getting brought out of his shell by the Kawamoto sisters, and how he's like stoic and silent, and when he's playing shogi and not much of a talker, he's like almost forcibly dragged out just by the sheer exuberance of the sisters, whether he likes it or not. But there's a scene where they're having dinner in episode 1, and there's like he's watching the TV, watching like a death reported on the news, and suddenly, whoosh! Gust of wind inside this house. It's time for a sad flashback. That was kind of a weird tone shift. And I was like,
I mean, I'm one of those weirdos, right? Who like never understands the criticism of like unless it's like outright just garbage. Like, I never understand the criticism of there was a rapid tone shift, so that was awkward, because I like when shows constantly shift gears. Like, I like rapid tone shifts, and that
I do.
Sangatsu no Lion does have a lot of that.
I do, but I also, they have to be not obnoxious. Like, a good example of a good tone shift is there's a good and bad tone shift in episode 1. The good tone shift is when we get introduced to the sisters, and like we are forcibly, you'd think that, oh man, we're gonna get beat over the head with this depression real sad boy hours this whole time. But no, as soon as he gets to the Kawamoto house, he gets brought out, and like, you know, you can't be sad. Momo is bouncing a cat up and down. And they're all like, she's saying, "Oh my god, like Rei's here and he brought fucking milk pudding. This is the greatest day of my life." You'd think that the gates of heaven just opened up. Whereas as they're sitting, like literally, like the mood is still happy. Like there's not like a sliding gradual shift, and then we get to like now we're back into sad boy hours. No, we're going from sad to happy, which is fine because, like, you know, we're going from the first established tone to this new tone, but now we're getting like thrust back into the first tone again in a really like jarring way. And it's not like a interesting jarring where it's like, oh, so now we're going to a third new feeling. No, we're going back to sad boy hours when it feels like we should be in Happy Town.
I mean, I like how it's jarring. I mean, I do think that's the point, and I don't see the reason why it would have to be a third new feeling.
I suppose it doesn't have to be a third new feeling, but just it feels. It just seems obnoxious in the sense of like, okay, you pulled the rug out from under me the first time by going from sad to happy in the house, but now it feels like you're trying to do it again, and now it's like you're setting up this expectation to me, be like, okay, so what's to stop this flashback happening within the house to not just like snap back to reality and like shift back into happy? Is this gonna be like a 2-gear speed kind of show the whole time? Is this like this is episode 1, man. These are the expectations you're setting up for me as a viewer. Is this what I'm to expect watching March Comes In Like a Lion, to just have someone am I to expect no gradual like pressing of the brakes? Is just the driver just going to be constantly shifting from going from drive to park to drive again, and and we're just going to like crash to a halt every time and then immediately go back to 50 miles an hour Happy Town?
I kind of get what you're saying. I do not relate to your interpretation of it at all.
I'm trying to think of like a show that does tonal whiplashes better, and also like another show that does it bad that I can compare it to. Can you think of any?
I mean, literally, because I'm terminally Nisio Isin brains, the first show that came to mind is Monogatari, where sometimes in the tense scenes there's just characters doing witty back and forths, which works to varying degrees throughout its run. So there is such a thing as doing it badly. I will give you that, but I mean, in that instance, it's like the reason why it would be bad is because the character's banter undercuts the previously established tension, whereas I don't think the show cutting to the suddenly, oh, I feel like I killed my father, I don't think that necessarily undercuts the happy vibes in a bad way.
Actually, you know what I hate more than the fact that they tonal whiplash again? It's the fact that they act so melodramatic about it. Like, it's the gust of wind that really fucking took me out. It's not just like he sees it and then he gets like the vision in his head. No, he has to get like fucking blasted with sad boy energy inside his house. It's like, okay, like,
well, that's just Shaft being Shaft.
Well, that's just a little up.
That's
where the hashtag deep comes in from. And it's like, oh, okay, someone took a film class and thinks they know all the ins and outs. If we do this, then that's how we set the tone. That's how we set a mood. And
okay.
It feels it's like a lack of a little subtlety goes a long way. That's basically what I'm saying.
So I actually want to backtrack, or I guess not backtrack, but go on a completely new tangent that will eventually come back to this. So a while back, I watched an interview with Chica Umino and Akiyuki Shinbo together discussing March Comes In Like a Lion when it was still an upcoming show. So it hadn't released yet. But they were doing this interview to promote it. And at one point, they discussed the differences in sort of like what the anime and what the manga shows, to where in what would be the events of episode 10 in the manga, where Rei is like rushing out and screaming his head off. In the manga, the way it is framed, it tries to show Rei's face as little as possible, because Chica Umino wanted the viewer to basically interpret sort of like what his face would look like and be like, basically do it with a lot more subtlety, in essence, like try and be less is more as much as possible. Akiyuki Shinbo, on the other hand, decided to just shove the camera in his face right there, just going all around and be like, look, he's crying, look at his pain. And I think that is sort of like what what problem you have, which is that Akiyuki Shinbo is a big fan of showing emotions as much as possible and going just there's no such thing as Akiyuki Shinbo showing a little bit of an emotion. He shows all the emotion as much as possible, pretty much as frequently as possible. That is his directing style.
It's funny you say that, because one of my notes that I forgot to bring up during my whole tirade on all the constant narration and all that adaptation business was that all of it made me feel like that you could have told me March Comes Like a Lion was a novel adaptation and not a manga, and I would have, had I not had the prior knowledge, I would have believed you. Like,
I mean, there are a lot of
time, all the way he does all this inner monologuing to a somewhat incessant, obnoxious degree. Like, especially this part where he's like, "Oh, I heard the cry in the cicadas, the department store's background music, and I silently gazed at him." Like, that is the kind of thing I would hear and I would see in a book. And like, be like, okay, so yeah, you're saying these to establish like the tone of the scene, to paint the setting using only words. And that's why I take such umbrage with how the anime handles it, being like, okay, you are failing to utilize your adaptation, this medium of anime adaptation, to elevate the material, but you're taking what works exclusively in a text-based medium and adapting it, it's like 1-to-1 without having to make the necessary changes. Like, anytime you adapt a thing from one medium to a thing in another medium, something has to change. Otherwise, it would be exactly the same, and that would be impossible.
It is funny you mentioned that, because Sangatsu no Lion feels like one of the studio's more straightforward adaptations. Because, I mean, as someone who has read at least the Bake and Kizu Monogatari novels, I can tell you the anime and novels feel like almost completely distinct, to where like so much adaptation was done in the transition to animation, which granted it kind of has to, considering it's like a novel. You know, you can't just straightforwardly adapt that. There has to be some concessions. But it is like very, very, very different. It does quite a bit to adapt the source material as opposed to just putting it into animation. Whereas I feel like Sangatsu no Lion, like, there are a lot of shots where you can tell, like, oh, this was definitely in the manga. Like, oh, this was definitely just pulled straight from there. And it is in no way like a moving manga adaptation. It has so much of Shaft's creativity there, to where like it'd be impossible to call it that. And it is very cinematic.
The animation, yeah, it's definitely cinematic. The animation and the artwork especially is very well done. I will say I hate the lips. I can't help it. I just hate the lips. I think they look kind of weird.
You know, I thought they looked weird at first too.
They look like
honestly,
they look like black licorice.
Honestly, they grew on me. I like the lips.
They are fine at times. Whenever there's a close up of someone's face, and I see their mouth, it never looks good to me. It's like, man, this would be so much better if it was just like a normal ass anime mouth and not just these black licorice ass lips. But it's a minor thing in the face of, like, if that is the sacrifice we must pay for having the art be so consistently good, having background art that is good, having a soundtrack that's good, and having the animation, it doesn't go crazy every single episode, but it's never bad, and the artwork is never bad either.
Something I love about Sangatsu no Lion is that it literally shows you how you don't need a huge budget or like a bunch of crazy animation to make one of the greatest looking anime of all time. At least in my opinion, one of the greatest looking anime of all time. All you need is, you know, fantastic directing and like framing shots interestingly, and, you know, being occasionally pretty cinematic. But also, it's like Sangatsu no Lion doesn't necessarily have the highest animation quality. And that's consistent with all of Shaft's shows, except for like Nisei Monogatari, because that was just
unless your name is Kyoko, in which case you get all of the best cuts for some reason, because your hair, you get the best framing. Her hair is constantly flowing.
Kyoko does get a lot of great moments of animation.
I think they knew that she was the best character, so they had to give her the stage presence and framing to match.
But like, unless it's Nissan Monogatari or Madoka Magica, and Shaft is basically just pissing away all their money because they can. Generally speaking, Shaft shows are like low budget to normal budget, and Sangatsu no Lion is the same way. It does not have nearly the animation quality of Nissan Monogatari, but it doesn't need it. It looks great just as is. All you need to do is be smart with how you divvy out the budget, reuse footage when you need it, and there you go. You got like a fantastic looking show.
Before we fully move on from the, I mean, we kind of did already. Before we like 100% move on from the tone whiplash conversation, I fucking laughed when that one scene in the episode where we get the flashback of his time in the house, in the shogi house. I laughed when him threading the needle into his sleeter just match cut into the slap to the face that Kyoko gave him as a kid. He's like, okay.
Not gonna lie, I love that moment. I did not laugh. I was taken aback.
I was a little taken aback, but I was too busy laughing to be like, all right, sick tone shifts, brah. Like, cause like, I get that the purpose of the tone shift is like to be a shift, and that's why the term the whiplash comes in, because like, oh, I was expecting one thing, I was expecting to be in this one atmosphere, and now you have forcibly pushed me into this other one. And like, it can work, but you have to it's weird for me to describe.
I'm gonna try and all right, I think I know what's happening.
So like, try to explain. Please explain to me why I laughed at the part where him threading the needle of just him trying to sew together his sweater turned into him getting slapped in the face as a kid by his sister.
I think it comes down to how seriously you're taking the show.
I'm taking it seriously. Yeah, I would not be so engaged in the in like that whole half-hour conversation we had about his backstory and how Kyoko is like the best character if I wasn't taking it seriously.
I mean, yeah, you're definitely not like not taking it seriously. I think it probably is a headspace thing. Or also just maybe slaps are funny to you. I don't know. Yeah, I'm honestly starting to get at a loss of words.
I'm trying to like piece it together in my own brain, and like the best way I can describe it is that it's just a poorly done tone shift. It's like, so why are we going from like you're taking me from, okay, I'm going to repair my sweater, into, ow, I just got abused by my sister as a kid, and now we're gonna dive into my backstory. It's like, all right, dude.
I guess it's a combination of the unexpectedness and the lack of correlation.
Yeah, you know what? The lack of correlation is a good way to put it, because I won't. I'll go into it with as little spoilers as possible. In one of my favorite anime of all time, Erased, there's this moment near the end of like the episode where the mystery gets revealed. And
I know exactly what scene you're talking about. You don't have to be light with spoilers, because I have already been spoiled.
Okay, yeah, so when the killer gets revealed, and like, we are given a little, they set it up properly. You are given some reasons why you shouldn't be fully trustworthy of the killer we have interacted with before, but we haven't like put him in a position where he's like suspect number one, where he's like, okay, he is obviously the guy. If it's not this guy, then who could it possibly be? And so, when Subaru does a thing with him and being like, okay, we're gonna do this nice thing to help this person out, and reaches to be like, oh, hey, let me do this nice thing for you because I can tell that you're like, you want to do it. And then we see the tone. The tone does shift, but it's not like the hardest whiplash ever, but it's like, it's an oh shit moment where it's like, oh shit just got like in 100 times more real, and now the reality and the darkness of the situation is seeping in at the same pace as it is like to the audience as it is to the character. And it's like, oh, in fact, now that I'm saying it out loud, that's, I think, what happens. Like what I think makes a good tonal whiplash is that the characters are experiencing it the same way that the audience is, whereas to Rei, he's just thinking about it for some reason. Whereas to us, we are the omnipotent observers of his life. We are seeing him going from just repairing a sweater at home to, oh, by the way, I'm now going to dive into that time I got abused by my sister, and I'm going to do it by going with I'm in the meta of the show by threading a thread through a needle by getting slapped in the face. And it's like, okay. You gotta pace yourself a little better than that, my dude.
I do get what you're saying with that scene. It doesn't quite explain the one of him looking at the TV when it's like, this son killed his father.
Well,
like he
that
goes
time it was the presentation.
All right.
It was like the gust of wind that made me be like, okay, like cool your jets there. What's a famous like avant-garde director's name? I don't want to say Hitchcock. That's too obvious. Like Federico Fellini or some shit. All right, Capicola or whatever.
Something I guess we'll shift gears to something I wanted to talk about earlier, which is Rei's character. We sort of talked a little bit about him, but
we talked a lot about Rei's character.
We did talk a lot
dude.
about him, but there was one more thing I wanted to say, which is that I just like how much there is to sort of like mentally chew on when it comes to him. I mean, first of all, you've got the backstories, which, yeah, you know, that is sort of just like having more plot. You know, maybe it's not necessarily a character attribute, but it does, you know, play into his depression. Or really is one of the major, like a combination of factors leads to his exact mental state. And that is, you know, more characterization. But there's just so much emotionally going on with him at pretty much all times. And the show is willing to be subtle about it. I was going to mention this way earlier, but in episode 1, like right at the very beginning, before he goes to the Kawamoto house, he gets a text from them and he's, they're basically like, yo, come over for dinner. And he's, you know, beginning to type, oh, well, I'm feeling a little under the weather. Then they text him again and they're like, by the way, we forgot to get some groceries. Please get them for us and bring them over and then have dinner with us. And what I like about that scene is that it sort of shows subtly why he doesn't want to go to their house, which is that he feels like he's sort of like leeching off of them or like mooching off of them, you know, taking advantage of their kindness. He feels guilty about it. But once he's able to do something for them and be useful to them, then he's able to go over to their house. And the show gets way more into this later on. Like, it becomes pretty much the central aspect of his character for like an entire side arc. But that's
the way I viewed that scene was that less that he was feeling like a moocher and could only go over if he could like provide something to them, but more of like he's just so kind of like socially inept that he when they sent that second text as he's trying to send that first text, they are kind of like, even if they don't realize it, or maybe like they're kind of baiting him, they're kind of robbing him of the ability to say no. So it's just like, oh, and he doesn't have like the mental fortitude or the social aptitude to say, no, I don't feel like coming over, now that they've like put this slight bit of pressure on him and like the slight bit of expectations of him. Was like, well, if they expect this of me, I guess I gotta do it so to not let them down.
That is another fair interpretation of the scene. But that just leads more into like his general feelings about the Kawamoto house, which is also another bit of like emotional complexity where he's socially reserved and doing social stuff feels like it takes effort for him, and you know, it's sort of like mentally exhausting to him. Like, it is healing, but it also is like, you know, he doesn't innately want to talk to people. He innately wants to be on his own. And that sort of drives him away from the house, along with, his feelings of mooching off of them. And it's just like,
Yeah, and
for any given aspect of his life, it's easy to list like a billion different things Rei feels about it. And that's what I think makes him such an interesting character. At least to
and Rei
me.
will be more than happy to do it himself, and to no one in particular, in his own head.
I mean, sometimes.
Bro, Rei putting one piece of fried chicken on a slice of bread and then folding the bread in half to make a faux sandwich is the best way thus far the show exemplified how depressed he is.
That scene
To be like,
is
to how little he
amazing.
is able to care for himself. And like, you see, you don't need a fucking inner monologue to show how much a character is not liking themselves enough to take care of themselves. Him folding a slice of bread to make a sandwich, not even just like cutting it in half, but just folding it with one piece of fried chicken. It's like, oh, this motherfucker's sad. This motherfucker can't even make himself a proper sandwich because he doesn't care for himself enough that much.
I just don't think the show is really all that overbearing in showing his depression. Like, to me, this isn't what overbearing looks like. There's enough subtlety to it. Even if it does go all in on showing the emotions, that to me is like way better than underselling it. And it's not obnoxious to me, at least, to like sell it like as hard as possible. And as long as he isn't directly monologuing, hey, I am sad, this is my sad life, welcome to the sad life of Rei Kiriyama. No, it's done with a lot more tact than that.
Yeah, I will. That's why I called some of the. I've definitely felt this more in the first half of this block rather than the second half, because the second half was like when it started to get really good. But that's why I made the difference between #deep and fake deep, because to call the show fake deep would be an insult.
It would.
To compare this to Bunny Girl Senpai would be to spit in Miss Umino's face.
I mean, maybe I'm just really resilient to pretentiousness, because that's another accusation that gets lobbed at. I say this all the fucking time. I can't stop mentioning this show, but honestly, just guess what it is.
Monogatari?
Yep.
I mean, Monogatari can be pretentious.
Honestly, I
but
like
see,
that it's
the
pretentious.
the way Monogatari is pretentious is that it thinks that every little thing the characters have to say is of equal dramatic weight. Like a conversation in a playground about I don't know, a fucking TV show, or like the fucking Schrodinger's cat or some bullshit like that, is of equal dramatic narrative to, oh, by the way, I'm possessed by this ghost crab that makes me weigh nothing, or some shit like that. And it's like, okay, well, if everything is of the same dramatic weight, then how am I supposed to tell the difference of like what actually matters and what is thematic and what doesn't?
Well, I will send the firing squad on you in about 5 minutes. Until then, continue.
And so that's why I think Rei is much more enjoyable and likable when he is interacting with people, specifically the sisters, and like expressing himself. Even if like he's not in touch with his emotions, he is way more enjoyable to just interact with and watch, just seeing him around people, than he is narrating to himself. Because more often than not, when he's narrating to himself, he's either saying something I could pick up on my own, or he's telling me, oh, December snow. It's like, it gives it the feeling of isolation, makes it even more intense, or some shit like that. It's like, shut the fuck up. Just go be a big brother to your little sister who you want to see confess to her baseball middle school crush and shit like that.
I guess what makes it
go do that instead, please.
I guess what makes it a lot more fascinating to me is that it is part of the intentional narrative, which is that he is constantly stuck in his own head, which I know you know that, and I know you still dislike it.
I know that's the point, but like there's a difference between a character being stuck in their own head and dragging themselves down. There's a difference between making entertaining and making it obnoxious. Here's where I gotta pull out the fucking big dick Western animation card again. There's a show called BoJack Horseman, which I would argue obviously there's a world of difference between Rei Kiriyama and the character of BoJack Horseman, whereas Rei sees himself as a bad person, but is surrounded by people who are basically holding themselves back at this point from slapping him across the face and shaking and be like, no, you fucking retard, we love you. There are people who love you. Why can't you see that? BoJack is a bad person, and even though he makes attempts to become a better person, they are also it's a mixture of the things he has done are so fucked up, and the way that he tries to better himself are so self-centered and self-destructive that it's tragic to see him attempt to be better. Because, like, as much as you want, no one wants someone to fail unless you, like, fucking hate their guts. But, like, on a general empathetic level of just having empathy for people, just, like, the baseline minimum enough to be a not sociopath, you want to see people succeed whether you know them or not. You're obviously inclined to see the people you are closer to succeed than others, because as much as you would like every person on the planet to succeed, there's 7 billion going on 8 billion, and you're just one dude. There's not enough time in the day and not enough love to go around. That's just reality. So you're more likely to lend out your support to the people that you know that are maybe having a rough time and you want to help as much as you can, as opposed to some homeless guy who lives in your city that you don't know. Because, you know the person. You already have a pre-established investment to want them to see them be better, because seeing them happy probably makes you happy, so you'll do whatever you can within your power to make them happy, ergo making you happy in a way.
Yep.
So, and the way I bring up BoJack Horseman, because they are able to put you in BoJack's headspace, and not once is it obnoxious. I cannot recall a single, and it's interesting because BoJack is a terrible person, and Rei is not a terrible person. Though, if the worst thing that Rei does is make some people's lives a little worse because he beats them in shogi and makes them less successful in their career because of it, if that makes him a bad person, BoJack Horseman is like Omega Hitler. He has found a way to go further beyond Hitler. He has reached his Super Saiyan God of Hitlers.
More of his flaws do emerge as the narrative continues. So just hold that thought for a second.
Yeah, the same goes to BoJack, but like magnitudes, literally magnitudes, mountains higher. So if you ever watch that show, keep that thought in mind too.
All right, I
guarantee.
I honestly probably will.
Unless Rei straight up fucking either rapes or kills a person, BoJack will hold the title over his head.
Bro, the Rei Kiriyama mass murder arc was pretty poppin', not gonna lie. Pretty fire.
I always thought it'd be Momo to be the one to set off the nukes.
Oh yeah, Momo does. She takes
She's
revenge
the one pulling the spring. Bro, she's the one pulling the strings. She's the one who drove the truck into Rei's family.
Yeah. She planned it all along, and then after Rei didn't end up in the orphanage like was her plan, she decided to bomb it out of rage.
All right, back on track. Let's see, what haven't we talked about? Oh, Nikaido, he's pretty important.
Nikaido is awesome.
He's interesting to me, just even on the surface level, for being a fat character in an anime, because usually anime is not the keenest on body diversity, let's call it, or body positivity. Usually anytime there's a fat character, them being fat is like a facet of their personality, usually being that they like to eat.
I mean, to be fair, Nikaido does like to eat, but he also has to
yeah, but he at least understands it. Like, he knows that he loves to eat, but he's also like, he has to like forcibly will himself to be like, no, I cannot eat things that are like high in like protein and fat. I need something like bland, but like he's on a diet essentially.
Yeah.
And like his diet matters more so than others because he's also has
very sick,
very hard implied to be anemic, and I would not be surprised if that
he at
has
one
something
point
to do.
Does literally get a bout of anemia, as the show puts it.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if he has. Well, they do have to take him to the hospital, so he probably does have a actual medical condition, probably something beyond his control.
No comment. But anyway, Nikaido, I love his like super gung-ho, energetic, I'm your rival, we're gonna fight just like in the shonen manga, it's gonna be great, you were my rival since childhood and I'm gonna beat you. He's so charming and immediately fun.
And like the interesting contrast between Nikaido and Rei, aside from the obvious like, oh, Nikaido is very upbeat and very very eccentric, whereas Rei is reserved and sad boy. But as I have I'm gonna fondle my crystal balls real quick and just imagine that Nikaido like his family life seems like he's doing okay, but going by his apparent like this love of life that he is like the only shogi player that we see throughout the series who like plays shogi, and yet he does get upset when he loses, but he's the only one who also seems to like love it. Like he loves shogi to the point where it's not just something that he was happy to be good at or needed to get closer to a family member. No, he actually fucking loves it so much that like he is taking an active measure to spread the good word of shogi to the masses, to the point where he made a pop-up book for children to explain shogi because he knows it's kind of a complex game. It's probably kids are probably not going to understand it unless you put it in a language they understand. And so the based boy did it himself. He made the book himself, published it because he's also rich, and is able to be this positive influence on himself and others, and is so gung-ho with Rei. And I can't help but wonder if he's able to be this way because he is not able to do most things in life because of his condition. And if I were to even get very crystal ball fondly, probably does not have much time on this earth. Or at least will have something that happens to him that complicates things, let's call it.
One of my favorite things about Nikaido is the side of Kiriyama he brings out, where he's like, I'm your best friend, Kiriyama, and Rei's like, no, you're not. You just sort of declared yourself my best friend. And Rei's like constantly ticked off at him, but still ends
He's a tsundere.
Yeah, he's a tsundere, basically. And it's like, it keeps Rei an interesting character as much as it does Kiriyama. Why am I saying?
Yeah, you're right. It does keep Rei as interesting a character as Rei.
Rei as interesting a character as Nikaido. There, I said it. Like it just keeps him a more varied character. He doesn't feel one note that way. Whereas someone like Ichigo from Bleach kind of felt one note to us. Rei interacts with different people in different ways. And the show goes out of its way to show the complexities of that.
Yeah, and tying it back to my contrast point that I just realized I didn't like fully flesh out. The fact that I think Nikaido, like definitely more so, has something to do with his health. Obviously, his health is not good. He probably has a condition, and it's gonna, if I were to guess, just going off of like basic storytelling knowledge, it's gonna fuck him up some way, or like dramatically impact his life to make it to a point where no matter what thing Rei has to be sad about, at least he has his health, whereas Nikaido probably won't even have that come like some big turning point in the series. Yet I think he kind of knows this at some point, or like he thinks maybe he can avoid it as best he can, but like even with that off in the distance as a possibility, like Rei is a sad boy, and maybe if he doesn't think things will get any better, at least he isn't going to like die prematurely, whereas Nikaido might have that thought off in the distance and still able to be as energetic, eccentric, and happy as he is.
Oh god, there's so many no comments. There's so many things I can't comment on.
Literally, you saying that just kind of confirms in my head. Yeah, this motherfucker's gonna die, isn't he?
No comment.
I mean, not Japan doesn't really introduce a serious fat character without that playing into their health in some way.
I mean, to be fair, his health condition isn't that he's fat necessarily. It's more so.
I'd imagine him being fat is a byproduct of it.
Possibly. Although I do like how Akari sees that and is just like all over him immediately. Like,
well, because she likes him big, she likes him chunky.
I remember you sending me that that note on your Google Doc in the group chat.
Dude, I'm not kidding when I say that. As soon as I saw her, like, almost in a weirdly fetishistic way, being attracted to his like round body, I just paused the episode, pulled up YouTube, and put in the Madagascar 2 Big and Chunky song, the Moto Moto meme.
It is the only appropriate course of action upon seeing that scene. This is more of a general point on Sangatsu no Lion on the whole, which is that perhaps my favorite thing about it is that it shows such a broad range of emotions. We're like, this show isn't just a sad show or a happy show or a funny show or a wacky show. It's literally all the shows in one. It is this huge stirring pot that basically seeks to encapsulate the ups and downs of life. And I'm, I like that. It's very large in scope and covers so many different topics with such depth. Shaft's directing is always giving it that wacky edge. It's just big stirring pot me like. Many flavors.
Yeah, I realize we've been going on for over 2 hours, so we should probably start wrapping things up. So as we move into the conclusion of this block of episodes, I gotta ask, did you have any moments similar to I did watching The Owl House again, coming with either a greater appreciation for the show at this point, or maybe you noticed a few flaws you didn't before, or both? Did you have like a mix of both that happened to you?
It's weird because, not gonna lie, it hasn't been that long since I rewatched the show. So like, something like 3 months prior to watching this batch of episodes, I had already rewatched the batch of episodes. Maybe it was probably more like 4 or 5 months, but still not that long. So when I was rewatching it, it wasn't like after 2 years, I've changed a little as a person. It's been a while in my memory. It was more like, yeah, it's exactly how I remember it. And it wasn't boring. I mean, it was fun to watch. It was kind of like, yeah, it's how I remember it. Probably going to take a break from the show.
Yeah, there is a strange... Well, the break we're going to take for the show is the fucking laundry list of shows we have to cover before we can get back to the Owl House and March Comes Like a Lion. There is a strange bingeable quality to the show, which I found very fascinating because the show is slow. I would not describe the show as fast-paced whatsoever, but I would notice that, like, as I'm watching it, I'd be like, oh, has it been that many minutes already? That's weird. It didn't feel like it took that long.
I did have those moments, even with it being my third time watching this batch of episodes. And a little bit of a personal anecdote, right? The second batch of episodes, the final 11, my first time through the show, I watched those over the course of 24 hours. One evening, I was like, okay, gonna watch like 5 or 6 episodes, slept, first thing waking up in the morning, got some coffee, and then was like, hey, I'm gonna watch some more Sangatsu no Lion. That seems like a good idea. It is insanely bingeable.
Yeah, I've been getting better about watching the episodes before we start recording and not just leaving them all to the very last minute. Especially with this show, because unlike shit like Made in Abyss or Owl House, which I have seen before, this is like a slower paced show that I haven't seen before and is a lot of. So I made an effort to be like, okay, I'm gonna start watching it Friday and then pace myself. So then when I watched it for the first time, I was like, all right, it's going just a little slow, but it's not having that same quality of like, I could watch an episode of The Owl House and 23 minutes will go by in what feels like 10 minutes. I'm like, what the fuck happened to the time? But as the show went on, that bingeable quality did come up where I was like, yeah, I could watch another episode. Like, they're going by fast enough. I don't feel like this is like an agonizing slog.
It is most certainly not agonizing. Except for
no,
Rei.
like yeah, well, Rei agonizes in the show, but nothing about this show makes me feel like, oh, time to fucking punch into the mines and dig up another few episodes of Sangatsu to do for the podcast. It didn't feel like work. It felt like, yeah, I'm having a good time. I will say, I am sad to say I'm not, at this point in time, I don't think it's the masterpiece that everyone says it is, or I've heard everyone say it is, and that I thought it would be, but it is a good show. And the fascinating thing about it that I realized as we have done this podcast is that this show is, I am thinking more highly of it now than before we started recording, because talking about it is more fun, or at least I got a greater appreciation for it than just watching it.
I mean, yeah, it sort of is that way with most shows, I think, where like talking about it makes you realize how intricate it really is, or how, great certain things were executed. And maybe helps you vent your rage.
Well, yeah, there are also moments where it's like, I was watching, like, Dragon Maid Season 2, and I'm like, the whole time I'm watching that, I'm like, yeah, this is a 10. I don't even need to fucking talk to anyone about this. Like, I'm glad that I got the opportunity to, but, like, I didn't need to talk about how fucking great the fight scene between Toru and Elma is. I understood that shit in real time, and I liked the backstory between the Shogi family, between Rei and the dad and Kyoko and Ayumu, but I have a greater understanding and appreciation for it now that we had this back and forth about it that I was able to chew on because of this podcast. So I think as I come away from the show now, with the 2 hours and 10 minutes has been going on, I feel like this is definitely the kind of show that you're not gonna get in the moment. You do need a little time to chew on it. And if you're anything like me, viewer, and you get a little annoyed by some annoying pretentiousness occasionally, then there are going to be some moments that bother you. But as someone who's watching the show for the first time, it's definitely something that's worth experiencing. And we'll leave you like something to talk about, like we have this whole entire time.
I will say it does suck a little bit that I'm rewatching this so soon, because like it is sort of a
I was gonna say, we've been, even though this has ended up being an anniversary celebration of the podcast, we've been planning this out for almost as long as the podcast has been around. So I was like, why'd you rewatch it recently when you knew that we were gonna rewatch this you were gonna rewatch it for the podcast?
Well, see, the backstory behind it is I was trying to get my dad into it, and that's sort of how the rewatch happened. And also, I think when I had first started the rewatch, we had either brought it up purely as a hypothetical, or like hadn't even brought it up at all. Like it was more of like an idea just thrown out there by me. Although actually, now that I think I threw out the idea before I had rewatched it, but didn't expect anything to come of it, and then started the rewatch. And then a little while later, it was like, hey, we're gonna do that thing we planned on doing. And I was like, oh, okay.
I see. Well, do we have anything else we want to say?
Nope, other than I still stand.
Yeah, the very last note I want to leave it on is during the last episode where there are very cute moments, like when Rei gets a bad fever and gets taken in by the sisters, and then Akari makes it a point to be like, oh no, Rei makes it a point to be like he feels warm and fluffy whenever he's at the house, and Akari likes to make things feel warm and soft and fluffy. And there's a note in his head that plays when he's like surrounded by the sisters and being taken care of when he has a fever, and he says he's become full fluffy. I thought that was cute.
I think episode 11 is a really great send-off to this block, and also a really great follow-up to the end of episode 10.
Yeah, it's because he thinks that he belongs nowhere, but no one is an island, and you can't belong nowhere because if you belong nowhere, then you don't belong, because you can't belong by yourself. In order to belong, you have to have one thing or one place or one person that is there to belong with. And so that's Rei's arc. He's got to understand. No matter what it takes, he's got to understand, and he will come to understand that he does have a place he belongs, whether he realizes it or not.
And that is how the cookie crumbles of Sangatsu no Lion.
And then the actual last note I want to leave it on is how we neglected to mention that Akari works as a hostess to care for her sisters. And not only is that just an interesting plot element to be like, oh, she could pursue a career in something she enjoyed, but no, she has to do this because it pays well, and also because it happens to be with a family member, so she's able to get a stable foundation for it. But in episode 11, there's this conversation between Akari's aunt and Akari's grandfather, being like, I don't like that she's working as a hostess at a less than respectable position. And but the aunt is like, don't worry, I'll never let any of the patrons lay a finger on her. Rather, they won't be able to lay a finger on her, because the whole point of their club is a high society, only the finest patronage will come in and exploit the male weakness for women, and that they will pay for female interaction. And I was just like, this is how OnlyFans started? Someone had this thought, but on a less respectable degree. And this is just how OnlyFans started. This show takes place in the late, I think in the time where it was written the late 2000s. But if this were just 10 years later, this is how OnlyFans would be created.
I mean, hey,
this one would fucking thrive.
Sangatsu no Lion predicted the future. Everyone talks about Family Guy and The Simpsons predicting things. No, it's Sangatsu no Lion, baby.
And it's you know what? She's right, and I'm sad that she's right. Fellas, don't give all your hard-earned money to women who cannot love you back. Give all of your hard-earned money to us by spending your time watching the podcast, subscribing, liking, commenting what you think. Subscribe to the Patreon that doesn't exist at this point in time, but maybe will exist if we ever succeed.
Depends on how many subs
retroactively give us
we
all
get.
of your money.
Just pretend to give us all your money, and then we'll
ask us
appreciate...
for our PayPal in the comments and send us money.
Exactly.
What were you gonna do? Spend it on a woman? No, not likely if you're watching this podcast.
I'm the only woman you need to spend your money on.
Oh. Alright. Well, you learn something new every day, I suppose. We have entered the Bridget arc.
Oh no.
Topical, that's gonna age well. Yeah, well, that's just good about do her for this episode of Castaway Anime. I'm Neon Manta.
And I'm Crunchy Bagels.
And you'll see us next time.